What is up, you guys? Teller checking in for UFC 290. Boy, does that feel good to say. This card, quite possibly the most stacked card of the calendar 2023 year. We're already halfway through. We've definitely seen some stacked cards, but this card is just ridiculous. I'm super pumped for it. Of course, headlining the card, we have the greatest featherweight of all time in Alexander Volkanovski taking on the phenom in Yair Rodriguez, the young fighter who has slowly but surely been maturing into one of the top featherweights in the division, and he gets his opportunity this upcoming weekend. Brandon Moreno, the flyweight champion. I mean, you guys do see Mexico is being represented in a major way. Two big-time fighters in the main event and co-main event spots here. Brandon Moreno is going to be tested here. We'll talk about that betting line moving forward, but Alexandre Pantoja already has 2 victories over the current champ. So Brandon Moreno getting an opportunity at some redemption in his own right there. You got the greatest middleweight of all time in Nickal taking on Tresean Gore. Poking some fun there. We'll analyze that fight in a much more serious manner as Nickal getting a step up in competition. If you ask me, Tresean Gore is a very dangerous fighter. I love the matchup. Whitaker versus Duplessis, Dan Hooker versus Jalin Turner. I mean, the main card is absolutely stacked, and don't get it twisted. The prelims are absolutely stacked as well. So, let me slow down. Let me not start diving into these fights before we even specifically jump to each fight here, because I'm just excited. I'm ready to go. Real quick, if you guys can all like this video, every single one of you guys, I would roughly probably have 5,000 likes on this video, and it would mean the world to me. Now, that's not realistic, but a lot of times you hear these YouTube creators like me just saying, please like my video, please like my video. And I know how it is, because I don't do it all the time either. To be honest, I don't do it as much as I would like to. Unless I'm liking what I'm listening to, sometimes I'll slide over there. I'm trying to get better at that. Can you pause for a second and just like this video for me? It'll mean the world to me. If we hit at least 500 likes on this video, I'm going to pump out a free play for you guys moving forward. I'm going to do another free play video for you guys. So can we hit that 500 like mark, please, guys? All right. Catch me on all my social media. It's all scrolling below. And you guys know that we have something major lined up for this card as far as betting goes. So if you want to work with me, you guys know you can reach out to me and I'll get you my pricing. All right, guys? Let's jump into this first fight.
The teller.
It's another day. Left jab, right jab. This is MMA. Mixed martial arts, quick body parts, undefeated when I pick 'em. Who the champ, who the victim? Looking in my crystal ball, I predict the winner. Never stop fighting. If you lose, keep your chin up. Know how the game go. I'm a smart fella. Welcome to the show. This the MMA fortune teller.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.
So Tatsuro, Taira was supposed to be taking on Clidson Rodriguez a little bit ago, actually 2 cards ago. That fight did fall through, and fortunately enough, the UFC was able to find Taira a new opponent, because I've been very eager to see him back in the octagon. And I like the matchmaking here too. Edgar, Cháirez, if you guys remember him, he fought on Dana White's Contender Series. He did come up short against the very talented Clayton Carpenter, but he made Carpenter work in there, the undefeated big-time prospect in the division. So Cháirez really showed what he was about in that fight. Since losing that fight, he went on to get 2 more victories outside the UFC, I believe, finishing both of those fights. He's a well-rounded fighter. That's something that not everybody really realizes, especially when you kind of just watches Dana White's Contender Series performance, where he was looking to really land some big shots. But this is a fighter in Cháirez that out of his 10 victories, 6 have come by way of submission. So this guy, he's a well-rounded fighter. He's still very young, 27 years old. I know he has the look on his face like he's been through some stuff, and he looks a little bit aged, I guess you could say, for his age. He's still very young. Now, not as young as the 23-year-old Taira here, who you guys know I've been very high on Taira. I think I think he has some very very legitimate potential for this division. He's very well-rounded, but specifically his grappling is very high level, and that's where he's had a lot of success throughout his career so far. I mean, when you think about the CJ Vergara fight, the way that he was able to close the distance and get in on his hips, snag the backups with ease, I mean, you really understand the level that he's at with his grappling. CJ Vergara, he's not necessarily a fighter that's lacking that much with his wrestling, and he made it look very easy in that fight, did Taira. So, as I said, he's a very well-rounded fighter too. He controls distance very well. He has very good footwork, and if you get eager in there, if you get frustrated and you just run in, I mean, he's a fighter that could definitely hurt you with his boxing or his kicks. He's just a very well-rounded fighter. So, like I said, Cháirez did make Clayton Carpenter work, and Carpenter's a fighter that really he has some polished grappling in his own right. But there was moments in that fight where we saw Carpenter getting in on the hips as well and getting some takedowns here and there. And I think that Taira is going to be able to do something very similar there. Cháirez is a dangerous fighter, but I think that Taira handles this fight, and I think it's going to be down on the mat. You take a look at Cháirez's 4 losses. 2 have come by way of submission, and in fact, he was actually submitted by a fighter we're going to be talking about in just a little bit. And Jesus Aguilar was caught in a submission there in the 5th round, going deep in that fight. And I do believe that might have been a guillotine choke. Let me just clarify that real quick. It was a guillotine choke. Not the most complex submission. I think Taira will be throwing much more diverse attacks down on the mat. Give me Tatsuro Taira to get the job done, and I don't have a problem with taking him to get the finish here. I mean, this is a fighter that has 13 wins, and 10 of them have come by way of finish, specifically 7 submissions. So I'll target more of a submission finish. Maybe he gets on the back and pulls something like that off there. I'm very high on this kid, and I think that he's going to be easing his way into the top 15 very soon here, potentially after a stoppage here. Maybe he cracks into the top 15. I mean, there's no reason why he shouldn't be. I know he needs to have more fights take place, but the skill level is there. So let's go take a look at the betting line. Right now over at BetUS, he is a -900 favorite. It's a very, very high line. And in fact, I would say it's a little too high. We haven't really seen Taira tested that much. I mean, he looks great, but we haven't really seen him battle tested. We haven't seen him cracked with some big shots and see how he starts to act up when he's tested a little bit. So, I mean, a -900 line, I mean, need I say more? That line's a little ridiculous. And especially when you take into consideration that Edgar Cháirez is a dangerous fighter in his own right. We talked about that. So I think that line's off. Got to say the value is on a +600 line on Cháirez. I mean, I really want nothing to do with that fight. I think that I'll just sit back and enjoy the performance of Tatsuro Taira. And, he is going to be the face of Japanese mixed martial arts, and I'm a big fan of Japanese mixed martial arts, and you guys know I've been saying it's been lacking a little bit over the some odd years now, so we need Taira to really be the face of Japan in the mixed martial arts world, and this will be another step towards that. From one very young and talented fighter right over to another one, Cameron Saaiman taking on Terrence Mitchell. Terrence Mitchell, if you guys remember him from The Ultimate Fighter back in the day when he got starched by Kai Kara-France on the show, since that devastating knockout loss, he strung together some victories and is getting an opportunity here. He's 33 years old, fighting over in the Alaska fight scene. You guys know that I am not high on the Alaska fight scene, and they just really haven't given me any reason to be high in it. There's really not any big names coming out of Alaska. I guess Cannonier is technically fighting out of Alaska. I mean, that's, I don't know, his situation is a little different, I think, but not a lot of big names. I mean, you think of like Cody McKenzie back in the day, almost had as good of a guillotine as the Teller. I mean, he was close to it, probably as close as it's ever gotten, but still a little bit short, not as good as mine, but the Alaska fight scene, it's not good. And to be quite honest, I'm not really that high here on Terrence Mitchell. Terrence Mitchell, I hope I didn't say Terrence McKinney earlier, but Terrence Mitchell, fighting out of the Alaska fight scene, you take a look at his resume, and, first and foremost, you want to see something cringeworthy, check this out here, man. Terrence Mitchell, a lot of his fights are hard to pull up online. You could pull up a couple of them. They're more of the dated fights that are from about 6 to 7 years ago. If you pull up the video of him knocking out this kid, Travis Zink, which this took place over in Anchorage, I mean, this was disgusting. If you go to Tapology, you can't even get a link to this kid, Travis Zink. And I've never really seen this before. Look at this. It won't let you click on him. It says not available for as far as what Travis Zink's record was going into that fight. Pull that fight up, and I kid you not, over half of the people, more than half of the people that are listening to this right now, even you guys that have never even trained, that are just fans of the sport, you would starch Travis Zink. This kid had no clue what he was doing. How in the hell was he in the cage with a fighter that was a 9-2 professional that actually, was a reasonable fighter, right? I mean, obviously he's a reasonable fighter, is Terrence Mitchell. The horrible matchmaking, and it played out exactly as you thought it would have played out. I mean, he got head kicked in 23 seconds. The kid didn't even know how to throw a punch, didn't know how to defend himself. It was disgusting. But look, karma's a bitch, because in Mitchell's next fight, he gets knocked out by Cháirez France. So we talked about the 4 fights that he just won in a row, finishing 3 of them, and then there was a DQ in the Josh Terry fight. Not against high caliber opponents, not really too excited about what I've seen. On the other hand, you got this kid, Cameron Saaiman, who is an absolute stud. We talked about the fact he's extremely young, so the future is so promising. I mean, so far he has passed all the tests that has been thrown his way with flying colors. Not that he's faced a lot of tests. We need to see more from him, but an excellent striker. The way he switches stances, he's like a video game character. That's what I feel like when I'm breaking down tape and when I'm watching him move. It's like watching the UFC video game. The way that he just moves just so seamlessly and changes stances and just is very quick and is a very polished fighter. So far, under the UFC banner, again, not a lot to go by, but landing 5.39 significant strikes per minute while only absorbing 2.59. He's been very efficient in the cage. 40% takedown defense, take that for what you will. 60% significant strike defense, that's a solid number there. And 50% takedown accuracy as well. Not shooting a lot, 4 attempted takedowns, solidifying 2 of those. He's a well-rounded fighter, and then this is a kid that I really believe we're going to see be a solid UFC fighter for a long time to come. And obviously, I am picking him to win this fight. I just think that he is going to be the better striker. He'll be more fluid with his movement and whatnot. And I haven't seen anything from Mitchell that's going to make me pick him here. Now, he's the more mature fighter. He's been around the game for a long time. Maybe he shows up and surprises a lot of us here. But I mean, when you take a look at his resume and whatnot, there's just nothing that you could really say, oh yeah, he's really doing his thing and he's ready for this test against the young buck here. He's proven to be a well-rounded fighter. Out of his 15 wins, 10 by KO, 5 by sub. But again, we talked about the level of competition. He also really has 3 losses when you include the Cháirez France loss. For some reason, they don't count those. They're exhibition bouts, which makes no sense. 2 decision losses there, and then the 1 knockout loss to Cháirez France. We don't have a reach on Mitchell here. He probably will have the reach advantage. He's 2 inches taller. Not worried about any of that. Saaiman's going to be doing his thing out there. So Saaiman opened as a minus 350 favorite on BetUS. He's now a minus 365. I think that the line continues to trend that way. It might not get too much more out of hand. It's already very high, but we could easily see Saaiman touching the minus 450 mark for this fight. Maybe you want to mix it in a parlay piece. I mean, he should get the job done here. But if you want to be a little bit more cautious, you don't really typically want to target those kind of lines. It's not really always the best idea. But I'm telling you guys that this kid Cameron, he's going to get the job done this upcoming Saturday. So 4 months ago, after Crute and Menifield threw down and we went to the judges' scorecards and it went to a draw, I know we were all thinking the same thing. We were dying to see this fight instantly rebooked. And that's what we're getting here. So we're all very excited. Another solid piece of this card. We get to finally, or hopefully, see this chapter closed here between Crute and Menifield. If you guys remember how this fight played out, Alonzo Menifield was beating Crute down in the first 2 rounds, but then Crute finally started to take control of this fight in the 3rd round, got that 10-8 round where he dominated down in the mat, was really pushing the pace on Menifield. This fight is such an intriguing fight in the sense that stylistically, they match up so well. They're very different, right? Menifield's that big power puncher. Crute, He's been working on his striking throughout the years, but honestly, defensively, he's lacking. His real bread and butter is his grappling, his jiu-jitsu, and the cardio that he can push. I've had action on him at points in time throughout his career, and I'm always hoping that he's going to his grappling. I'm really never comfortable when he's trying to work his striking, because there's times where he will get comfortable and he'll try to hang with his opponents, and we've seen him hurt. We've seen him hurt on the feet. When you want to look back at the performance that he had against the big Canadian submission artist who since moved around weight classes, and Misha Serkinov was dropped and then eventually submitted early on in that fight. He's faced danger within his career. Knocked out against Jamal Hill. Didn't want to see him on the feet at all in that fight. And of course, he was sitting there trying to throw down with Jamal Hill. Was knocked out by Anthony Smith as well. Believe that was the fight where his leg got messed up, TKO. But nevertheless, still, he was not looking good for the limited time we saw that fight taking place. And, in this matchup, I think it's very clear he needs to instantly get this fight down to the mat. He does not want to play with Menifield on the feet at all. I think Menifield will hurt him again if he gets too comfortable there. But if he has his head on his shoulders and he implements the right game plan and is also able to tactically pull it off, if he gets this fight down to the mat and has Menifield breathing heavily early on, I think we see a lot more of what we saw in the third round take place early on in this fight, and Crute has real potential to take this fight over. There's also real potential he might be able to finish this fight if he's just making Menifield really work down in the mat. He's exhausted. Maybe he sets up a finish, whether it's a sub or TKO or something like that. But let me be very clear. There's a very realistic possibility that Atomic Alonzo Menifield lands some big shots early on again in the first and second rounds, and this time he might just get that finish because it was so close to being finished the first time around. But here's the thing. As we look over at the betting line, on my bookie, Crute opened as a -103. He's now a -106. Essentially, this fight is a pick'em. Real quick, if we look throughout all the sports books, you steadily see action coming Crute's way, but that was more so because Crute was the very, very, very slight underdog. It's just the line's kind of evening out. It's a pick'em fight. Do you feel comfortable that Menifield lands that big shot and finishes him this time around? Or do you think that Crute can avoid that big shot and get this fight down to the mat? After seeing Menifield just recently, he knows a little bit more of what to expect. This is how I'm looking at the fight here. I'm never really crazy about banking on a finish or a knockout. Statistically, it's going to be a little bit less likely to be seen. Now, of course, that's not Menifield's only way to win this fight. He could obviously win a decision too by outpointing Crute. But I'm going to say that this fight gets ugly once again. We see a lot of scrambles and a lot of wildness going on. And I think that Crute will get this fight down to the mat at some point in time. And I think that I'll favor the grappler here over the striker. And I don't say that with a lot of confidence, but I will go with Crute, but would not be surprised in the very... I wouldn't be surprised at all, let me just say, that if we see Crute get starched in the first or second round. All right, so that's how I'm feeling about this fight. The line is very accurate in my opinion. It's a pick your poison type fight. This is when I really want to see you guys comment them below in this video, because I want to see who you guys are rolling with here. Please let me know. Are you taking Zoe or are you taking Crute? So we got a little bit of a setup fight here taking place in the light heavyweight division. Vitor Petrino, an absolute fight finisher. Since fighting under the UFC banner, he's been absolute fireworks. And Marcin Prachnio, you guys know the deal with Prachnio. We'll get a little bit more into him here in a second. But I do believe that this is a fight where the UFC wants some crazy action, kicking this card off, and Petrino is very likely to smash Prachnio on the feet and get that knockout. Prachnio has shown to be lacking defensively. Now, he has surprised at times, and he's been working on his craft. We've seen some little improvements here and there, but I'm still not impressed with what I've seen from him. He is decently durable and has decent cardio. He's a tough dude, but he is there to be finished. Let's be clear there. He's been knocked out 4 times out of his 6 losses. As of recently, finished by Mike Rodriguez. That ain't looking that good. Magomed Ankalaev, a guy that should be holding that belt in the near future. Knocked out by Sam Alvey. That's obviously not a good look. That's really one of the sores on his resume. Victories over Isaac Villanueva. Now the Khalil Roundtree one, Roundtree's a talented fighter, but he's a head case. So that was just a day that Roundtree was off, if you ask me. Maybe I'm being a little bit tough on Prachnio here, but coming off a victory against William Knight, again, another head case. I think that he snuck off 2 victories against some head cases, and I don't think that Petrino is that. Petrino, 25 years old, big-time power in his hands, but I felt that in his last fight against Anton Turkaj, in a fight that I made some money on, that he really showed that he's a fighter that's developing some very good ground skills as well. Now, he needs to practice his technique a little bit more so, needs to learn to be a little bit more fluid as far as we did see him using his strength and his muscles a lot in order to pull reversals and pull off some transitions, and it actually worked for him. He's a very, very physically imposing fighter, but I would like to see him polish up his grappling more so, where he's not really using his strength and he's just flowing more so down on the mat. But his striking is big time. This is a true athlete, and I like Petrino here. I mean, no reason to really talk too much about Prachnio. This picture sums it up. This is the 3rd most recent picture posted on his Instagram. He's cracking bricks with the elbow. You know that the teller's easily slopping on 4 more bricks up of that, and I'm still cracking that. So I don't really understand why the face has to be so exaggerated and all that, because I could do that well, keeping a stoic face. So I'm just not impressed. And, Prachnio, I think he's going to get put out in this fight. How about that? I think that Petrino is going to land, and Petrino, only 25 years old, so much room for growth. We're going to see a better version of him here. He's going to have almost a 3.5 reach advantage here, even though he's an inch shorter. And I think that his career should pan out to be a fun one. I think that he hangs around, but needs to continue to refine his technical abilities. He's a very physically imposing fighter, like we said, but needs to continue to improve some of those things there. Anton Turkaj, that was his last win we talked about, in a fight where he really had to dig deep too. This is what I liked about that fight. When it went to the 3rd round, a lot of fighters, when you see them participating in that type of fight where it's grueling and you didn't get that knockout, you almost had it, and then the tough grapplers starting to get in on you, a lot of them will start to wilt. And it seemed like Petrino had a second gear in that fight, and that's what I like. So I think his cardio is decent as well. The big knockout that he had against Rodolfo Balato, that was fun as well. Knocked out Gazmarad and Tigilov outside the UFC at UAE Warriors, a former UFC fighter, a very flaky fighter, but nonetheless finished him. Give me Petrino here to get that early knockout and to really get this card cracking. That's when I'm probably going to be hopping on my IG in the story, getting loose, and just having some fun there. So make sure you're following me on MMA Fortune Teller _, because we're going to have some fun this weekend. And we'll take a look at the betting line. So Petrino, on my book, he opened as a -263 favorite. And the action actually went the opposite way, surprisingly enough, but it instantly corrected itself and went back to a -263. But I'm surprised that we even see action coming in on Prachnio, to be honest. I feel like Petrino kind of showed that he passed that test against that type of fighter. I think that Turkaj is a similar fighter to Prachnio, or he poses some similar threats, and maybe you can even argue he's better at some of those. I know his career is still green, but we take a look at Jazz Sports action coming in on Vitor Petrino, opened as a -261, now a -271. I think we see Petrino closing right around a -330 favorite. That's how I see the line going. And I'm taking him to get that finish. I'll take him to get the job done before we touch that 3rd round. In the lightweight division, what are the lesser fights in the card? No disrespect, because it's going to be a fun fight, but Kamuela Kirk taking on Esteban Ribovics. Kamuela Kirk lost to Billy Q on Dana White's Contender Series, went over to the LFA, actually lost another fight over at LFA, and then he got 2 victories in a row, and got an opportunity to fight back in the UFC, had the biggest victory of his career in a toughly contested match against Makwan Americani, and after that, he got finished, I believe, by Damon Jackson. So that's where he's at right now. It's been a couple months past a year, about a year and 3 months since he's been in the octagon. So hasn't been that active. The age isn't a problem, still in the prime of his career. Hopefully he's just been refining his craft. He should be okay there. But you got Esteban Ribovics, who was just in the cage, took a last minute matchup fight against Loik Rashabov, and a fight that he finished very strongly in. And I think that he's somewhat impressed. I know Loik just lost his last match, but we know Rebecki's the real deal. I think that Loik is still a solid fighter there. My point is that Esteban proved that he's a scrappy fighter. He's a well-rounded fighter. He could grapple, good volume. He's a well-rounded striker. And I think that he's a decently promising fighter. He's still very young as well. This is a fight that I think will be fun. I hope this fight takes place on the feet for the most part. I'm excited to see how a striking match between these two men goes. I think that Ribovics will Ribovics, I think, will potentially push the pace and be a little bit more diverse with his striking. But again, there's a major X factor here, man. Kamuela Kirk, like I said, he's been out of the cage for some time, and we might see the best version that we've ever seen from him. He's only 29 years old. This fight was supposed to actually take place in the undercard of the Jones versus Gain fight, and it didn't happen. Kamuela Kirk is going to have a massive reach advantage, which isn't really something new. Esteban Ribovics, a little bit of T-Rex syndrome. Kirk will have a 6-inch reach advantage. So if they want to throw it on the feet, Kamuela Kirk does have potential to have success with his boxing. But I think that Esteban Ribovics is going to be very well-rounded. And if we see this fight go down to the mat, maybe we see Esteban changing levels and just mixing things up and being just a more complete mixed martial artist. I know that he's been putting in some work over at Team Killcliff FC. You guys know I'm very high on them. I still want to yell out Sanford MMA, Hard Knocks 365 and all that. They're always changing the name, but just understand that they are a serious gym. And, he's been getting work in with a lot of those guys throughout the last couple of years, and you see a world of talent all here behind Henry Hooft. So yeah, I'm gonna go at Ribovics. Ribovics was just in the cage as well, so he's gonna be very comfortable. I think he's gonna pick right up after that third round that just happened. I think he picks right up after that, and he just is a little bit more active in this fight. So that's the route that I'm going there. Let's go take a look at the betting line. Ribovics opened as a -196 favorite on my bookies, now -204. A little surprised to see action coming his way just immediately like that. I thought this line would have been a little bit closer, if I'm being honest. I thought that maybe Ribovics would be like a -155, -175 at most. A little surprised to see it at a -204 line. I think he still needs to prove more to us. And real quick, we could talk about his big victory that he had against Thomas Paul, where he knocked him out in the first round on Dana White's Contender Series. Thomas Paul, the English fighter, since that knockout loss, was finished again in his next fight, and he actually has a fight coming up over at Cage Warriors. But Paul, I don't know. I mean, he's either real deal, and then you scattered through his resume. Not a lot of big names, but when you break down tape on him, looks to be a good fighter. So yeah, I will take Esteban Ribovics, but I think the value is on Kamuela Kirk. He's a solid boxer, and he'll have that reach advantage in this fight here. So it's an interesting one, depending on how you look at it as far as the value and where you see it there. Now, when it comes to Mexican mixed martial arts, we all know the big names that are representing them. Yair Rodriguez, Brandon Moreno. We're going to be talking about those two men in a little bit. Of course, Alexa Grasso. Well, I'll give you a name of a fighter that could potentially be on that list down the line as well. Yazmin Jauregui. This is a fighter that is very promising. She's only 24 years old. Is a very, very talented striker. And she looked great in her last fight as she went out there and finished Estela Nunez. She's going to be facing off against Denise Gomes, the Brazilian fighter, a very tough fighter in her own right. This is a very fun match. Both these women are more than willing to throw down on the feet. I think this could be a big-time slugfest type of match. Yazmin Jauregui, 24 years old, like I said, she just has so much room for growth. We need to see more from her game overall, and we really need to know that she's a complete fighter. Denise Gomes, very tough. I don't necessarily think she's the biggest threat to exploit maybe a hole in Yazmin's game. I think this is a fight, like I said, where you're going to see these fighters throwing down. And if Yazmin gets caught with the shot, I mean, that is what it is. But I don't necessarily see Gomes taking her down and exploiting her ground game. I think those are some of the question marks we have about Yazmin here. Gomes looked great in her last fight. Really spoiled the party for me when she took out Bruna Brazil. That was the first free play loss, I believe, that I gave you guys after being on like a 5 or 6 free play winning streak, and then we had a little patchy spot there. Bruna Brazil, a fighter that's actually decently talented, but Bruna Brazil completely dropped the ball in that fight. Listen, I'm not trying to take anything away from Gomes, but if you guys remember that fight, Bruna Brazil froze up on the feet, and props to Gomes for going out there and cracking her. I don't expect Yazmin to be frozen up like that at all. I think that Yazmin's going to be ready to throw down right from the jump. We saw Gomes take an L against Luma Lagbunmi, and in fact, it's her grappling that you have to kind of keep an eye on as well. It hasn't looked that great. She won in a slugfest against Ryan Amanda on Dana White's Contender Series, and it's just another great match here. Two very young fighters that are tough and deserving to be on a card like this. I got Yazmin Jauregui. I think that she just has so much more potential, and I think that she'll be a little bit more crisp and sharp with her striking. You pull up tape on her, you watch her fights. I mean, her hands are always nice and high. She's always guarding the chin. The chin's nice and tucked, and she's a very diverse striker. And I think that she'll land some of the more impactful, cleaner shots in this fight. She's a little bit more lengthy as well. She'll have about a 1-inch reach advantage, and she's about 1.5 inches taller. Take that for what you will. She's just a more talented fighter, in my opinion. Has some real beautiful knockouts to watch outside the UFC as well. You can pull up some of her fights on YouTube. 7 KOs out of her 10. 10 pro victories. Give me Yazmin Jauregui to win the fight. We'll take a look at Jazz Sports, where she opened up as a -491 favorite. That's a hefty line on a women's mixed martial arts fight like this that you never know could play out closely. And when you think about Gomes' last performance, you understand that she's coming into her own as well. She's still so young. We don't know the ceiling on a Gomes. She might show up and really make this a close fight. So the line's ridiculous. Luckily, you do see it correcting itself. I mean, the line's ridiculous. She's now a -425 is Yazmin Jauregui, and I still think that that's a very high line. I wouldn't feel that comfortable with it. I think that Yazmin should probably be like a -280, -300. Maybe that's a little bit tough on her, but I mean, this is a fight that could very much play out extremely close, and it could be just a barn burner, tit for tat type of fight. It might be a split decision type of nod for Yazmin. There is the potential that Yazmin shows up though and lands that big shot and bloodies up Gomes and really bursts on the scene as an up-and-coming star. Give me Yazmin Jauregui to win a decision, and I'll say she gets the unanimous decision, at least getting 2 of the 3 rounds. I'll lean that way still, but the line, a little crazy if you ask me. In the flyweight division, we got Shannon Ross taking on Jesus Aguilar. Both these fighters coming off the Dana White's Contender Series show. Shannon Ross, I mean, in that fight against Vinicius Salvador on the show, he showcased that he is a groomed fighter. Obviously, he has a good amount of experience. He now has 20 pro fights. He's 34 years old. We saw a lot of that on the show, but some of the negatives that we saw from him is that he's lacking a little bit as far as the fighter IQ goes. He's definitely made some questionable decisions in there, and it cost him in that fight. If you guys remember, that was an absolute slugfest, but he was starting to take that fight over. And if he would have gone to his grappling a little bit more so, if he would have slowed things down, he would have won that fight. Telling you, I'm very familiar with that fight. I've rewatched it before a couple times now, and that's a fight that he could have won, and instead he chose to run up on Vinicius Salvador, looking to continue to slug it out, and he kept getting clipped, and eventually he was put out. All right, and now after that knockout loss, he still got an opportunity to fight in the UFC. In his octagon debut, he looked to be a shell of himself, coming off that knockout loss against Salvador. Clidson Rodriguez made quick work of him, and it almost looked like Shannon Ross quitting there. I should rephrase that, right? He didn't really quit. I mean, he got hit with some big shots. I mean, listen, I'm not going to sit here, on my chair and just talk about these warriors quitting, but I'm holding them to a higher standard, man. This is the UFC, and I mean, he did get hit with some big shots, got hurt to the body, got hit with some big shots up top too, but he wilted and he fizzled pretty quickly in there, man. And I just don't know how confident you could be backing Shannon Ross here against Jesus Aguilar, a young buck, 27 years old, only 10 pro fights, doesn't have a lot of wear and tear on him. He has proven that he's a warrior. He's coming forward. He's looking to brawl it out. We saw that on Dana White's Contender Series where he got the late finish, and he felt a lot of adversity in that fight on Dana White's Contender Series, but again, showing that he's not going to quit in there. He's going to continue to march forward, and I think that's where he can give Ross some trouble here. He's just a much more fresher fighter, and obviously he's still grooming his skills, so you're going to see a better version from himself. I'm not really holding him to the fire that much for the quick work that Taira made of him in the first round, submitting him. I already praised Taira enough. I told you he's the real deal, and I just don't think that Ross is that extremely polished grappler that's just going to pull him down to the mat and submit him. He only has 1 submission victory out of his 13 pro fights there. 3 knockouts. He's not really a fight finisher. So even though Ross does some things well, I think that his time has passed now, and I got to side with Aguilar here, just specifically based on the last 2 fights, the way that they went. He's a fine-tuned fighter. Aguilar is a very tough fighter. Aguilar still needs to groom himself a lot more. He has holes in his game. Ross can possibly take advantage of some of those things. He's more refined, but it doesn't come near the value of the toughness and durability of Aguilar and the freshness of him compared to how we've been seeing Ross Wilton there. So just to kind of sum it up, right? And real quick, I mean, you look at the Urseg loss that Ross had not too long ago. Urseg looked great in his debut, so you don't really hold him to the fire that much for that loss there. Rodriguez is a stud. Salvador's a good fighter too, but bad decisions in that fight. Lost to Ashkin Mokhtarian. That's not really a good look to do with tattoos all over his face there. If you're familiar with him, I believe he has a brother as well. There's just a couple questionable losses here. He's never really been a fight finisher. Just been a guy that's been going out there and just kind of doing his thing. He's in good shape. He checks off a lot of boxes, but doesn't really check those boxes off that well. It's like he's checking the box off with the pen that doesn't have a lot of ink in it, right? The waitress gave you a bum pen and you're sitting there on the top of the receipt scribbling, trying to get the ink to come out. He's not really checking those boxes off that well these days. He'll have the reach advantage as well, but Aguilar will be tough, and I could see him clipping him with the shot. I mean, there's a very realistic possibility that Aguilar gets a knockout finish in this fight just based on how Ross has been looking and the wear and tear that he's taken. Now, let's go slide over. I'm about to pause for the video there, about to wrap that up, but we got to take a look at this betting line where you're going to see that Aguilar is a minus 217 favorite. He opened as a minus 243, rightfully so that the line does close a little bit. In fact, if it wasn't for the durability issues that Ross has been showing as of recently, if we weren't so worried and cautious about him getting finished because of how he's been looking, as far as the overall skill set goes, I think that Ross is the more polished fighter and could win a decision if he's able to survive. But even if he doesn't get finished, I see him getting hurt with shots, and it's just kind of that will impact his performance. He'll start to be in the back foot a little bit more so. He'll get hurt. He's very likely to get dropped in this fight at some point in time. And even if it goes to the judges' scorecards, Aguilar will be inflicting damage on him. So I do like Aguilar here, but I think that I'm not crazy about this high line on him, to be honest. If I want Aguilar, I want him more like a minus 170, a minus 160. If that doesn't show my cards here, man, I think that the value is definitely on Ross. You're banking on him just to be durable enough to survive this fight and to showcase some of the experience that he has. Niko Price gets rewarded with an opportunity to fight an all-time legend of the game, a Hall of Famer, and Robbie Lawler, former champion. I mean, the list goes on and on. I can sit here and talk about Robbie all day. Niko Price has always delivered. He's always gone out there and have looked to put on a show for the fans. So the UFC rewarding him here for sure. Robbie Lawler, now 41 years old, a shell of himself. You guys remember watching him when he was just a young kid. He had a little bit of lettuce on his cabbage back in the day. Fighting out of, not the Lions Den. Was it Team Militich, right? With Pat Militich, Tim Sylvia, the Little Heathen. Not Little Heathen, that's Jeremy Stevens, excuse me here. Jens Pulver, Little Evil, I think his name was. But you know what I'm talking about, man. Matt Hughes, all those guys. I mean, Robbie Lawler eventually moved down to American Top Team. I believe he left American Top Team. He's bounced around, but he's been, I think he's training at Team Killcliff over there with Henry Hooft, I believe. And just a fighter that really revolutionized his career, revamped his career late on. You remember when he took the belt. I mean, he was a fighter that was fighting up in the middleweight division over in Strikeforce, knocking dudes out, was a little bit heavier than he should have been. When he came down to the welterweight division, it was just a perfect recipe for him to just wreak havoc. And again, at that point in time, he was just such a phenomenal fighter, the best version of himself. If you remember him going to war with Rory McDonald, just that southpaw striking style, the sprawl and brawl, he could do it all. Just a warrior, his lips hanging off his face. He's just continuing to go to war. He's a savage. And, real quick, let's take a look at the current Robbie Lawler, what we're looking at right now. He's 41 years old. All right, he just got finished by Brian Barberena. When Robbie was in his prime or even near his prime, he just runs through a guy like Brian Barberena. The sloppy, plotting warrior Brian Barberena is, but just not in the level. Had the victory over Nick Diaz. Nick Diaz came into that fight completely out of shape, and it was just a fight of two guys just way past their prime. So that was what it was. Nick Diaz was off the couch. Then he lost to Neil Magny and Colby Covington. No real shame in those losses, but I feel the last time we really saw Robbie looking to be somewhat of a solid form was against Ben Askren. If you remember, that was the fight that was stopped prematurely, where he was actually just looking to start messing Ben Askren up. And when you look in retrospect and saw how Ben Askren's career went, you kind of really realized that Robbie was actually about to start putting it on him. He was about to get out of that bulldog choke and start probably knocking his ass out there. So, but he's just not the same fighter. That was a long time ago. That fight took place in 2019. That was 4 years ago, okay? Robbie's not the same guy. We saw it in his last fight. Niko Price is still a very tough fighter. Niko Price just went to war with Philip Rowe, who just lost a close split decision match against Neil Magny. We know that Phil Rowe is the real deal. He's a good fighter. He really is. He's a surging fighter that's kind of been under the radar. And that fight was anyone's fight going into the third round. I've told you about this. I was sitting right behind Phil Rowe's cousin or brother, whoever it was, and right by the cage there, and the whole team was there, and Phil Rowe was pointing over and whatnot. Phil Rowe dug deep and got that late finish. Niko Price got a little bit sloppy. He tends to do that as he looks for his own kill. But Niko Price had a lot of success early on in that fight as well, and we know why he's so dangerous. Decision victory over Alex Oliveira before that. Lost to Michel Pereira before that. Knocked out by Vicente Luque. There's been a lot of ups and downs. The James Vick upkick knockout was ridiculous. Some of the more ridiculous knockouts that we've ever seen were performed by Niko Price. Of course, the Randy Brown and James Vick knockouts were sick. He'll knock you out off his back. And as old as Robbie is and the damage that he's taken, I would not be surprised in the slightest if we see something similar to that. Although Robbie's tough, but his defense has definitely slowed down. We've seen Robbie Lawler very frozen on the center line. His head is there to be hit. And I think that the powerful and wild Niko Price can land his mark here. And you got to go with Niko Price, man. It's a little bit of a mismatch when you consider the age difference and all that. So Niko Price opened up as a minus 250 favorite on my bookie. He's now minus 277. You take a look at all the books, steady action coming on Price throughout all these books. We're seeing him as high as a minus 295 over on FanDuel. That's a flat line. Hasn't moved yet, but I think Niko Price can easily settle in right around a minus 330, 320 favorite for this fight easily. People love them some Robbie, but his time has passed, so there's just no question about that. And just real quick, let's just check the durability. He's coming off that big knockout loss that we talked about that, but besides that, hasn't realistically been finished all the way dating back to the Woodley loss in 2016. So he's been a durable fighter, but if Brian Barberena can get that knockout, I easily think that Niko Price can. I'll take Niko Price via finish. I'll say he gets that knockout before the midway of the second round. So yeah, I am taking Niko here, and the value probably even on the higher line of Niko. It's hard for me to visualize Robbie Lawler coming in at 41 years old and all of a sudden looking back to vintage form. Some top 15 lightweight action here. Dan Hooker, the Warrior, coming off a victory against Claudio Puelles, facing off against Jalin Turner, who's coming off a loss. So kind of a funny circumstance here because a lot of people thought that Turner should have potentially got the nod there against Mateusz Gamrot. Gamrot pushing with the grappling, Turner inflicting a lot of damage in that fight. Turner, even though he's coming off the loss and Hooker's coming off the win, definitely the vibes are that Jalin Turner is the surging fighter, while Hooker has major question marks at 33 years old and going through the wars that he's been. In the background, you see Dan Hooker's boy getting the face tattoo. What do you guys think about this over here, huh? How about the native tattoo representing for the people, man? I don't know about that, man. That's a little much for me. But, Dan Hooker, a very polished striker. We know he throws the calf kicks, the leg kicks very well. Good boxing. He's a well-rounded fighter. But the wars that he's been through, of course, you think about the Poirier war. I think that fight took a lot out of him. I think that was a little bit of the beginning of the decline of Hooker. But you know what? Nothing but respect towards Hooker. He's already proved a lot and has accomplished a lot in the cage. But I don't know if I really see a lot of light down the line for him, down the tunnel. And then when you talk about a guy like Jalin Turner, I think that the future is so promising for this guy here, man, this young kid, really. Jalin Turner's still very young. You see him here getting some work in with Khamzat Chimaev. The question mark with Turner early in his career was his takedown defense and his grappling. We know that he's a very rangy, lightning fast striker. The southpaw stance, he's going to give so many guys problems. We've seen that before. You love to see him training with guys like Khamzat. And we've seen his takedown defense continue to evolve. Really even making Gamrot work in that fight with the takedown defense. But, we could take a quick look at some of the work that he's been doing. 28 years old is Turner, too. Oof, he's young. Submitted Brad Riddell, knocked out Jamie Malarkey, submitted Uros Medic, submitted Brock Weaver, knocked out Josh Kulibau. Realistically, that was one of the sleeper fights on his resume. Not a lot of big names here. Brad Riddell's definitely taking a step back. I don't even know if he's still fighting. He's a head case. Malarkey, good fighter, but been losing. And then Weaver, Medic, a lot of question marks here, but Kulibau has proven to be a tough fighter. So a little bit of a padded resume, but seeing Turner perform against Gamrot, you understand that it's real. It is real. His skill level is getting better and better. He's a dangerous fighter. He's deserving to be in the top 15. And, he's going to have a 2-inch reach advantage here, which isn't as much as we usually see him against his other opponents. Hooker's a rangy fighter too. I will take Turner all day in this spot here. I just think that he'll get the better of the polished striker and Hooker. Turner's just younger, quicker, more dangerous. Turner's submission game is getting better and better as well. But Hooker's very refined there as well. But I can't back Hooker in this spot. I know he went out there and took out Puelles. Puelles is shown to be a crafty submission guy, a crafty evolving fighter, but Turner is a much more dangerous threat than Puelles, in my opinion. We saw Hooker get knocked out by Arnold Allen before that, got submitted by Islam, no shame in that. Defeated Nasrat Akparos before that, was knocked out by Chandler. He just didn't see that hook coming all the way from left field. That's a question mark there for me. That was coming off the Poirier war. So that's where you really understand that he was kind of not himself. He should have saw that hook coming from out there. And Turner's a guy, he's a fighter that's going to be throwing shots right down the pipe, sharpshooter shots, and he's going to land on the mark. So we'll see how the Hangman holds up in this spot here. But I am going with Turner to get the job done. Let's go take a look at this betting line and see what we're talking about. Jalin Turner is a minus 250 on my bookie, opened up as a minus 200. So we have definitely seen action on all books going towards Turner's way, and I think that it makes a lot of sense. If you can get 2-1 odds, or if you could have got 2-1 odds on Turner, that's a solid line there. And I could see that line creeping up to the, I'll say it again, the minus 320, minus 330 range. A lot of fights kind of trending that way. Similar lines here. Turner is just the surging fighter. He's hungry. I think he gets the job done. Now, this is a fight that I feel like we've all been talking about for some time. People are very intrigued in this match. There's a lot on the line. Obviously, if Dricus du Plessis can go out here and take out Robert Whittaker, he's probably going to be next for Israel Adesanya. You guys know the little backstory between du Plessis and Adesanya, who really represents Africa. If you guys want to hop up in the comment section and tell me your opinion on that whole thing, I'm all ears. I'm not going to really go on too much about that. It's kind of a funky conversation. Not that I don't mind touching it. I don't really have much to say about that. It's not really my lane. But Robert Whittaker, one of the greatest middleweight fighters of all time. The only thing that's really preventing him from being the belt right now, or from holding the belt, is Israel Adesanya. And some people thought that he won that last fight in the rematch. It was very close. If you go rewatch that fight, you would actually see that fight played out a lot closer than some of you guys think. Robert Whittaker, very well-rounded, refined striker, underrated wrestling and grappling. Dricus du Plessis, a power puncher. We're talking about a fighter that has almost half of his wins via knockout. Believe it or not, 10 submissions as well. We'll look at his more recent work. Just had the knockout over Brunson, submitted Darren Till, went to a decision with Brad Tavares, knocked out Trevin Giles, knocked out Marcus Perez, which was his UFC debut. So he really bursted on the scene. Right? This was right around the pandemic and whatnot, the return to the UFC, and he bursted on the scene. He's a very fun fighter. But, if I cut to the chase here, all these talks about him fighting Israel Adesanya, I think it's a premature fight. And it shows, which some of you guys get mad when I say it, but it shows the shallowness of the middleweight division, because du Plessis is not ready for that title shot. He needs to put in more work. He needs to prove himself more. That fight that he had against Brunson, he started off slow. He was taken down in that fight. He definitely showed holes in his game. Yeah, he dug deep, and eventually he got the finish there, but they were both exhausted. It was a little sloppy, and it's just that performance doesn't really lead me to believe that he's going to go out there and really test Izzy. He has the power. When it comes to having that kind of knockout power, yes, anything's possible. He may go out here and knock Whittaker out. We've seen Whittaker knocked out, but if Whittaker fights a cerebral fight here, this is Whittaker's fight all day. He'll be the more conditioned, the more experienced, the more mature fighter. He has more options to win this fight. He should change levels, mix things up, work the kicks from the outside as du Plessis headhunts and starts to get sloppy and breathes a little heavily. So, you see him putting some work on the pads with Henry here, Henry Hoof. Now, this was back in 2022. I hope he's continuously putting in work with Henry over there at Team Killcliff and whatnot. That will help him out. He needs to throw his shots more straight. He needs to set up the power shots better. Not that he hasn't been putting in good work, but when we're talking about fighting the cream of the crop, when you're fighting guys like Izzy, good luck landing on your mark there. So, of course I am on Robert Whittaker here. Like I said, just has more options here. But I specifically think that he'll take this fight over more so as the fight progresses. I think that he'll really look good there. The one thing that he needs to be careful, which we've seen Whittaker do before, is he needs to be careful not get overzealous and get caught with a counter shot and get put on his butt. again, Dricus du Plessis does have that kind of power. I'm on Bobby Knuckles here. I got Bobby doing the fight. Still only 32 years old. I think he has a lot to give back, or a lot to still give to the game. Does have 30 pro fights. He's been through some wars as well. Du Plessis will be the more fresh fighter, has more mileage to give, has less mileage on him, but Whitaker is the more talented fighter. Crazy to think Du Plessis is the number 5 ranked middleweight fighter in the world. Again, I know some of you guys think the middleweight division is all that. I don't know. So right now, Robert Whitaker opened up as a minus 367 on Jazz Sports. He's now minus 407. That line's a little crazy, if you ask me. In the middleweight division, where we know that some of these men possess power, and we see men put down on a regular basis, and Whitaker has been knocked out, and Du Plessis has that kind of power. I'm not touching 4-1 odds to test that out personally, and just with the book not being out on Du Plessis, with him being young and expecting to see more evolution in his game, going to war with Brunson in his last fight, he definitely should look better here. But still, it's a tough task. But I ain't touching 4-1 odds. I think the value is on Du Plessis. You can grab Du Plessis right now. As high as a plus 310 underdog. That's a pretty crazy line on him, if you ask me. If it gets even more reckless, I mean, there has to be a lot of value there. Plus 330, plus 340. I mean, that's some value. But I got Whitaker winning this fight, and it can go a variety of ways. Decision. Maybe we see Du Plessis really gas out and be finished. I don't know, maybe a submission. He's been knocked out once before and submitted once before. And that was... Let's take a look at those losses that he took against Roberto Soldic. That was in 2018, the return to Wembley over there. And then the loss to Gareth McLennan, the South African fighter over at EFC Africa. If you remember Gareth McLennan, he submitted him, submitted Du Plessis. Gareth actually fought in the UFC as well back in the day. So, fun fight. Cannot wait. Like I said, we're going to be... enjoying this card, partying it up. So make sure you're following me on Instagram, because when this fight's taking place, man, we're locked in. We're going to be having a great time. Bobby Knuckles to win this fight. We got the biggest prospect in the history of the fight game stepping in the cage once again, and he's taken a step up in competition. He's facing the very dangerous Tresean Gore. Both fighters, not a lot of pro MMA experience. Tresean Gore with only 6 fights, Nickal with 4. Understand that Tresean Gore had some battles in the Ultimate Fighter House. He's had some amateur fights. I mean, the 6 fights is not really indicative of who Tresean Gore is. He's a dangerous dude. And you take a look at him when he was just, 19 years old. I mean, he's been a fighter from a young age. He's a scrappy dude. Bo Nickal, you know the deal with Bo Nickal. He's been wrestling since he was just a little kid, the prodigy. And I say that he's the biggest prospect ever come into the game, and I have some numbers to support that as well. If you pull up the betting lines on him, there's never been any fighter. I'll challenge any of you guys to pull up any UFC newcomers that have touched the lines that we've seen from Bo Nickal as he started to fight under the UFC banner. It's crazy. We'll get to what his betting line is for this fight once again, and it's ridiculous, especially when we're talking about the dangerous Tresean Gore, who's coming off a big victory. All right. Now listen, you guys know I'm a huge Bo Nickal fan, and I'm really excited to see him push towards the top. I think that he's going to hold gold one day. But I want to talk about his last performance where he took on the Nightwolf, Jamie Pickett. And, he had that head and arm triangle choke. It's really a simple sub, right? I think that's one of the more elementary subs. That, the guillotine, those are some of the first subs that you learn when you're in the gym. It's a very easy sub to learn. At least it was for me. That's one of the first subs I was pulling off left and right in the gym when I first stepped in. There's some things you could do to tweak it. But, once you figure that out, I was just a little disappointed, I guess I'm saying, that it took him the time it did to solidify that submission. I was really surprised that he didn't have Pickett tapping pretty quickly there, because it was deep in. And there were some things I was kind of wondering from a technique standpoint too. But you never know. People do things differently. Kind of wasn't angling off to the side. It was kind of, I don't know. And I'm just interested to see when Bo Nickal is tested, how he's going to perform in other aspects of his fight game. His striking has looked good. From the limited action we've seen from it, right? He dropped Donovan Beard, I believe. If you think back to his knockout victory over against John Nolan, was that his MMA debut possibly? But you saw that this guy is more than just a wrestler, right? And we saw that as well when he pulled the triangle choke off, off his back. I believe that was against Zachary Borrego. Real quick, let me pull that up real quick. Sorry about that, because he pulled off 2 different subs. But my point is that we have seen that he is more than just a wrestler. This is a fighter that is picking up the fight game in a different type of way. He had the arm triangle choke on Pickett we talked about, had the triangle choke over Donovan Beard. It was Donovan Beard where he eventually got that choke. The way he transitioned into that was ridiculous. Yeah, and that's right. It was the rear naked choke over Zach Borrego. I mean, so he's showing different elements of his game. The wrestling background is such a huge thing to have in his back pocket. Training over at American Top Team, that's a serious thing that he has going for himself. He's learning from some of the best. But I just want to say that if he ever struggles with getting the fight down to the mat, which it's going to be tough for anybody to really keep Bo Nickal from putting you on his back, you better land a shot early on. But if someone's able to stuff some takedowns and make him work, obviously that's the avenue that you're going to want to go. Tresean Gore is a fighter that carries some serious power, and it could realistically knock out anybody on the right night. He just pulled off a nasty sub on Josh Fremd. Actually hurt him early on. But now we'll talk about the Cody Brundage knockout. When you think about the performance Cody just had, it makes that loss look that much worse. I had direct contact with his manager, right? His manager actually reached out to me and explained to me that Tresean Gore should have never even took that fight, that he almost went to the hospital the night before, had a severe or very, very severely challenging weight cut going into that fight. And I think that had something to do with the way he went out, if you think about it. But nevertheless, defensively lacking a little bit there. Lost to Brian Battle. Brian Battle has proved to be a very legit fighter as well. The point being is Tresean Gore, I do believe he's a promising fighter, 29 years old. He's going to be a threat here. But I think Bo Nickal is going to be too much. Let me jump to my point here. Bo Nickal, he's the stud. At the very least, Bo Nickal will take over this fight with his wrestling. He will. We're talking about a phenomenal wrestler. Hopefully, Bo doesn't mess around too much on the feet. I think that Tresean Gore is a fighter that you don't want to play with too much. Both men almost have identical reaches. Bo Nickal will have almost about a 1-inch reach advantage. Both men almost the same height. Bo Nickal almost a 1-inch height advantage. Tresean Gore is a dangerous dude. And I think that Bo Nickal fights a cerebral fight here, uses his footwork properly. I think he knows Tresean Gore is a serious threat, and that he'll play it a little bit more smoothly before eventually getting in on those hips and getting this fight down to the mat. And maybe we really, really see what the wrestling's about here. We might see this fight go to a decision. I think that this fight will be the most octagon time we've seen in a fight from Bo Nickal, but I think then we'll really see the wrestling come into play. We'll see the continuous takedowns and just the control and the top game of Bo Nickal. I think that's what I'm seeing here. I'm going to take Bo Nickal to win this fight. I'm going to lean more towards a later finish or a decision. I don't know if he gets that early finish. I know he's been going out there starching dudes and whatnot, or subbing dudes and hurting them, but we'll see about that. And there is a realistic possibility Bo Nickal lands a big shot. Tresean Gore has been tested. We'll see how the weight cut goes for him. Give me Bo Nickal. I could sit here and talk about this fight all day, but opened up as a minus 1309 favorite, now a minus 1406, and these lines are ridiculous. The line trending Bo's way even as he opens up as a minus 1309. It's crazy. It's crazy. I wouldn't want nothing to do with that line. I don't know what you guys are doing attacking that line. I think that's a green and rookie move there. Stay away from that. Enjoy the fight. If you're crazy, also, and you want to, I shouldn't say crazy. If you want to attack the value on Tresean Gore, go ahead. But just know that Bo knows, whatever that means. That's like his little thing, right? Bo knows. Bo Nickal to get the job done. We got the flyweight kingpin, the champion, Brandon Moreno. You guys know I love this division. He's the man. He's taking on Alexandre Pantoja. We got another grudge match type of fight for Brandon Moreno. This is the third time he's facing off with Pantoja. We know the battles that he had with Davison Figueiredo. And if you think about it like this, I mean, not that this means much, right? In the third fight against Figueiredo, that was actually Moreno's worst fight. That was the one that he lost. He already lost the first two against Pantoja. So just take that for what you will. Pantoja has the decision victory in their last fight. And before that had a submission victory. I think it was right back in the Ultimate Fighter House back in the day. Which that fight took place, just to put things into perspective. That fight took place all the way back in 2016. It was the rear naked choke submission of Moreno. Moreno was so green at the time. And, Pantoja, at this point in time, I mean, he's the older fighter. He's the more mature fighter at 33. I mean, he very much is at the pinnacle of his career, while Moreno still has room for growth. But all the rounds that Moreno has put in as of recently, I mean, he might be nearing the prime of his career a little bit earlier based on the wars he's been in and the fight experience he has. I mean, he's already fought almost 30 times, just as much as Pantoja. I mean, this is just such an awesome fight this is the perfect match that needed to be made in the division here. I'm excited to see if Moreno can get that redemption. We know Moreno could do it all. He can grapple, he can strike. Pantoja can do it all as well. Pantoja, an underrated striker. I mean, he's lightning quick. He possesses some big power, has heavy kicks. We know his submission game is nasty as well. You do not want to play with him down on the mat. In the last fight, we'll run over some numbers here. This was the second time they fought when it went to a decision. Pantoja landing almost double the amount of significant strikes and total strikes. Moreno had 2 takedowns in that fight. He was 2 of 7 with a 28% takedown ratio there. Pantoja 0-0, no shots attempted, but Pantoja, in fact, was the fighter that had more control time, reversing him down on the mat. And that was a fight, when you check the scorecards, you understand there was some real dominance by Pantoja. I mean, he won that fight, scored 30-26 for Chris Lee, 30-26 for Marcelo Villena, and 29-27 for Richard Bertrand there. But again, a unanimous decision. Pantoja scoring 10-8 rounds in that fight. They had the submission the first time they fought. So this is a very interesting fight. Moreno, again, really has so much to gain if he can get redemption here. If he loses this fight, he's 0 for 3 against Pantoja, and you got to believe you'll never see the fight take place again. Although, who knows, right? He got 4 fights against Figueiredo. Pantoja will be at a 3-inch reach disadvantage here. He's 2 inches shorter, so Moreno, the more lengthy fighter. And again, Moreno is just hitting his stride right now, man. He's looking great. But that all being said, I'm going to cut to the chase here, man. I think the value is on Pantoja, to say the least, as he is as high as a plus 175 over on Bet Online. Opened as a plus 140. Action coming in on Moreno. He's a plus 154 on my bookie, opened as a plus 140. So that action coming in on Moreno. I mean, listen, Pantoja's already beat him before. Pantoja just checks off so many boxes. Maybe the one thing that you got to be a little wary, it's a 5-round fight, and Pantoja, we've seen him slow down before in the past, and he is getting older, coming off two submission victories in a row. Had a decision victory over Menifield. The Askarov fight was the fight where he slowed down. He started off early, was winning that fight, and then he slowed down and he lost that fight. Had a loss to Figueiredo as well. I'm taking the dog here in Pantoja. I'm taking the dog. Obviously, I feel there's more value on his line. I mean, Pantoja has had Moreno's number. I just think he's a fighter that checks off so many boxes. He's a dangerous fighter. I think mentally he'll have the edge, just knowing that he's already gone out there and defeated him twice. And give me Pantoja. I'm taking the Brazilian to dethrone one of the Mexicans fighting in one of the 2 Mexicans fighting in these big headline spots in the co-main event and main event spots. So it'll be exciting, and we'll see how it plays out. But give me Pantoja. You guys know what time it is. It's that little quick segment where I hop up in your earlobes and, or not your earlobes. I'm like actually all the way in the air, but I'm just letting you guys know that I have the option for you guys. If you want to sign up through my referral link to bovada.lv, you guys are getting this entire card for my official plays for free, and I'll give you another card on top of that as well. Shout out to everybody that's been reaching out to me, joining through the link there. I appreciate you guys. Obviously, I get a referral, but it's a perfect opportunity for you guys because you get an added bonus to your account, and again, you're getting my free plays here as well. So if you want that, if you're interested in that, reach out to me. I got all my information scrolling below. Shoot me an email, shoot me a DM on Instagram, MMA Fortune Teller _ or on Twitter as well, the MMA Teller. All right, and if you're not interested in signing up through the link and you just want my plays, if you're interested in that as well, reach out to me. The pound for pound best fighter in the game right now, Alexander Volkanovski, taking on Yair Rodriguez. Check this out. A lot of Mexican pride going down in this card. Nothing but love and support for that. But, Alexander Volkanovski, even though he fights out of Australia, I found this out recently in an interview with Volkanovski. Volkanovski, it makes sense, too, because he has the look, and I kind of sensed it. Me being a Greek-American, coming from Greek descent, from my father's side, I'm half Greek. It's funny, Alexander Volkanovski actually is half Greek as well from his mother's side, which hence the name The Great. And you got the Alexander there. Obviously, the last name, he goes under the radar with that Volkanovski. I don't know what kind of name that is, but his mother is Greek. And, he fights like a Greek. You can see the warrior spirit in him there. So I got some Greek pride going into this fight against Yair Rodriguez. Big fan of both these fighters. Listen, Alexander Volkanovski, you don't see a lot of fighters come off a loss and maintain their pound-for-pound spot in the game, right? And, in fact, the guy that defeated them is just behind them. I mean, that's crazy. A lot of people thought Volkanovski should have won that fight. He's the fighter that finished strongly. No matter how you had it, I thought it was very close. Volkanovski, what a performance he put on. He was undersized in that fight and it didn't make a difference. He had way more heart, had better cardio, talk about checking off boxes. Alexander Volkanovski is the king of checking off boxes. Phenomenal striker. Can grapple, cardio, heart. You name it, he has it. He's an absolute stud. And, I mean, how do you even go against Alexander Volkanovski when he's facing off anybody in the division, anyone that's even closer to the size of him, when he showed that he can go up and fight a guy that's way bigger than him, in Islam Makhachev, and who's so talented. I mean, this guy's a stud. Volkanovski right now, 34 years old. I say he's in the prime of his career. Didn't take much damage against Islam, right? Took some shots here and there, but overall, it wasn't a fight where he took a lot of damage, even though it was kind of a war. It wasn't that kind of war. You would say Islam took more damage there. Volkanovski has been a fighter that is very technical, landing 6.35 strikes per minute while only absorbing 3.4. That's a ratio, right? A crazy ratio. Double the amount of strikes landed compared to taken on. Yair Rodriguez, so flashy, so tricky, but actually a fighter that does eat some shots. 4.03 landed on him compared to his 4.78. But as of recently, he is just lightning fast, and he can give so many fighters problems, and just really he could break dudes down with the kicks, the body kicks that he's landed. As of recently, we saw what he did to Josh Emmett, just took his soul out of him. He broke Emmett down, and check this out real quick too, right? In Yair Rodriguez's last fight, where he eventually pulled the sub off on Emmett, but that was a fight where he broke him down first. You saw the heart that Emmett just showcased in his last fight, so you know what it takes to defeat and break a guy like that. That's the type of power that Yair Rodriguez has. That's the flash he has. We saw him knock out Brian Ortega. Now, the Max Holloway fight for him, that's not the greatest look. The loss that he took before that, because we've seen Volkanovski kind of go out there and get the best of Holloway in the feet, and they have similar types of styles in the sense that they're very tactical, great footwork, and then they do a little bit of it all in the feet, and they could go out there and easily style on you. I kind of see this fight playing out like that. I see Volkanovski being, when I say the better striker, I mean, yeah, he'll be the better striker. Even though Rodriguez is so flashy and whatnot, you take the bread and butter of Volkanovski with the right footwork and the right distance management, and him slowly chopping and picking away at Rodriguez. If it goes down to the mat, I see Volkanovski on top, shoving that big bald head down into his chin, controlling him down there as well. Yair's dangerous down in the mat as well, but Volkanovski knows how to avoid all that type of stuff. Volkanovski's the stud. Got to go with Volkanovski here, man. Comment below. If you're taking Yair Rodriguez, you have to let me know. I want to know right now if you're taking Yair, because I understand he's a great fighter and he's surging. He's 30 years old, but how do you go against Volk here? I need to see that ahead of time. Comment below now. Both men, very similar reaches. Volkanovski, even though he is 5 inches shorter, with that half-inch reach advantage, right? Built like an absolute warrior. 25-2. The only men to ever defeat him was the Islam fight, which was controversial. And then you got to go all the way back to that Corey Nelson loss, where he was knocked out in the third round back in 2013. Good old Corey. You can't even click on him here. So, that was a long time ago, though. I got Alexander Volkanovski. Let's take a look at something real quick. Yair, and this is a 5-round war. He went to the last time we saw him finish was against Frankie Edgar, but that was a much different version of him. That's when he really had no wrestling and no ground game, and he was brutalized down in the feet. I could see something similar to that, even though Yair will be more capable down there and he'll be defending himself, but I could see Volkanovski damaging him up and ground and pounding him. Potentially we see him bloodied up and maybe stopped late, 4th or 5th round. Wouldn't be shocked there. But I'll lean Volkanovski decision. It'll be an exciting fight. And let's go take a look at the betting line. Volkanovski, a minus 434. Action coming his way in Jazz Sports. He's a minus 446 now. You take a look at the line overall. Action coming in mostly on Volkanovski's way. But that line is settling right around that minus 450 mark. He's a big-time favorite. I don't know if I'm crazy about that line. I think that Yair is a dangerous fighter. And with him creeping into his prime and as dangerous as he looked and as good as he looked in his last fight against Emmett, I don't like that type of line of Volkanovski. I feel the value is on Yair Rodriguez here. If you're grabbing a plus 335 line, that the value is on Yair Rodriguez, but I have Volkanovski winning this fight. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up the very stacked UFC 290 card. You guys know what time it is. We got to hit you up with some closing thoughts. And I'm winging this one. Let's see what we got here. A couple things I've been thinking about as of recently. I'll say this much. I don't think I talked about this too much. Something I recommend you guys do is sometimes we find ourselves just going through the habits of life, just going through our daily motions and just kind of following the lead of what we've done in the past. Sometimes it's not a bad idea. In fact, it's a great idea to kind of analyze some of the things that you do in your regular routine, some of the foods that you eat, all right, specifically, right? When I was younger, man, I never cared about what I was eating. I was always on a budget, especially when I was younger, right? Going to Walmart, eating Walmart chicken, eating Walmart fruit and all that crap. You know, if you're fortunate enough to have a little bit of extra money, invest it into what you put in your body. I'm serious, man. Think about this. I know some of you guys think it doesn't really matter. I wish I would have done this at an earlier age even. So, all right. So certain fruits, man, try to go organically on spinaches, strawberries. There's a lot of pesticides and all this weird stuff. And if you're planning on having kids, if you're at that age or something like that, maybe you want to focus on what you're putting on your body. I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit of what's the word here? Maybe I'm a little paranoid, but you know what, man? Things you put in your body comes out. It comes out in weird ways. We've seen, you know, animals, you know, that are around certain toxic environments come out kind of oddly. Trust me, it correlates to humans too. Just, I don't know, maybe I'm being crazy here, but just watch what you're putting in your body, especially if you're doing things like that. You want to be cleansed, right? Go to the sauna, sweat all those toxins out of your body. Go run out in the sun. Make sure your body's nice and clean before maybe you're planning on having kids. Or if you're just not feeling good, right? If you're feeling sluggish, watch what you're putting in your body. I've noticed certain things, just weird things, right? I got a neighbor that has a mango tree. If you're munching on the mangoes too much, I've noticed it makes me a little foggy, and all that sugar, maybe, you know, you want to have a balance with some of those sugars. Even when it comes to fruits, you got to chill out with the fruits. I know fruits will actually put weight on you too. You want to be balanced with your diet, right? Eat fruits, very good for the vitamins, but watch what you're eating. Balance your diet out, and you want to feel good, because you guys know what I'm talking about, right? There's days where you feel foggy and you don't know why, man. You're typing a text message and you can't even spell the words right, and you're kind of in a daze. And then some days you wake up, like I woke up today, feeling just uber focused and just clean minded, and I've been eating pretty good. I had a good dinner, had a good breakfast, and I feel good. All right. And I've even noticed it with certain coffees, certain types of cheaper coffees and whatnot give me more anxiety. There's some coffees I drink, I don't get no anxiety, I feel clean. Just kind of analyze and see how your body reacts to certain things, and just be aware. Be aware. Think about it. Talk to yourself in your head. Remember we talked about that? Have those conversations in your mind. Don't be an ant. Don't be what do we got? An armadillo. One of those armadillos that's just at night, or a possum just walking with their head down, going through the daily motions. Keep your head on a swivel. Analyze what's going on, all right? I'll leave you guys with that. I hope you guys have a blast for this UFC 290 card. I hope you guys make a lot of money on it. I hope you guys work with me. I hope you like this video. If you don't choose to work with me or whatnot, I hope you guys do your own thing. I hope you guys hit a solid card, make some money. Appreciate all your support. I hope you guys catch me on all my social media. It all means a lot to me. I appreciate you guys. I hope you guys appreciate the work I'm putting in. I've been really, really crunching some tape and putting a lot of time into these videos. So, all right, guys, I'll sign out on that. Signing out. Teller.
Welcome to the show. This the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.